think I'd like to start out by having each one of the candidates give us a 1-minute talk about, make it a political commercial if you want, but for 1 minute, tell us why we should elect you as our next U.S. representative. And I'll start with Mr. Olson.
Oh, and the first time you speak, please stand up and state your name. That won't be counted on you for your time.
There you go.
And then we'll go.
I'm Eric Olson.
Yeah, probably stay seated with your microphone.
I'm from Fargo. Lived in that area for most of my life. Most of my experience is from entry-level jobs, working my way up. I've been a district manager and an operations manager for a couple of inventory companies. I've also been a retail store manager. I currently work in the warehouse, manage receiving and maintaining a warehouse for a local internet retailer and run my own inventory business. The reason I'm running for Congress is out of concern for the debt. I see a mounting public debt that is unsustainable, and I see very few people from either party that are doing anything serious to correct the problems. I see huge amounts of corporate money being dumped into campaigns, and I don't think that our elected officials are being responsive to the people. I think that they should have to appeal to the people to raise the funds for the campaigns. So that is my primary concern, but I also want to prevent legislation such as SOPA that basically tramples our constitutional rights.
Thank you. Mr. Kolk.
Thanks, Dave. Brian Kolk. Well, basically, there's a lot going on right now in our country, and I've spent my entire life defending our country when it's most threatened. And right now, the biggest threat to our country is the policies coming out of Washington, D.C. We've talked a lot about the debt. Everyone knows that's our biggest problem. It needs to be fixed. But I'll tell you what, if you want to change the way Washington, D.C. operates, you got to change the kind of person you're sending out there. We've got to quit sending out political appointees, bureaucrats, and lifetime politicians. You've got to send different people if you're going to get different results. We hope to show you over the next few months that we're the kind of person that can make those changes, make a difference, and put our country back on track. So thank you for coming tonight. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Koppelman.
Kim Koppelman. It's good to be with you tonight. And as I said, I'm Kim Koppelman. I'm a North Dakota native. I was raised on a farm in southeastern North Dakota, lived in a small town, and since getting married about 33 years ago, which I know dates me, I've lived in the West Fargo community. I've owned a business for 27 years, have served in the state legislature for 17 years, and have had various leadership positions in those roles. But I'm not really here to talk about me, because this election is not about me. This election is about the future of America. And America stands at a crossroads. America is the greatest nation on the face of the earth, but there are serious storm clouds on the horizon that threaten our very way of life, that really raise the question of whether the nation that we've known, the nation that our founders gave us, will be the nation we pass on to our children and grandchildren. So that's what I'm here to visit about tonight. I think this could be one of the most important elections in our lifetime. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Mr. Gettle.
Shane Gettle. First of all, let me thank everybody for coming out tonight and the sponsors for putting this together. You know, right now, things are pretty good in North Dakota. Our economy is booming and unemployment is low, and we have this economic surplus, which is generating tremendous opportunity in the state. If only our country were experiencing the same thing. And I'm here to say that it can, if we bring fiscal responsibility to Washington and bring our budget under control, balance that budget, and start to pay down the mountain of national debt that we have. That's the first thing we need to do. The second thing we need to do is get this economy going again. And that takes some initiatives that will include tax reform, regulatory reform, beginning with the EPA but not ending there, and repealing Obamacare and starting over with health care reform in a way that allows us to get it to be more market-driven and patient-centered. That's what I'm running about. That's what my campaign mission is all about.
Thank you. Ms. Grandy.
I'm Betty Grandy. I'm here tonight because I have a passion for my country.
Your mic
I'm
is on.
sorry. We'll start again.
Okay.
I'm here today because I have a passion for our country and I'm saddened by the direction it's going. We have a great frustration that is brewing in Washington, and with that, I bring to the table my concerns as a mother, but also that as a legislator, and that's why I feel that I'm the most qualified to come to the table on this issue. I've served in the legislature, and in serving in the legislature, I have passed the legislation, stood up on the tough issues, and went to work for the citizens of the state. I legislate from the point of view that what's good for the family is good for the community, and what's good for a community is good for the state. What's good for the state is good for the nation. Our state is doing well because of the legislative work that we have done. And with that, I want to go out to Washington to work on cutting the spending, reducing the taxes, repealing Obamacare, reining in regulation, and standing for the family. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Kramer.
Thanks, Dave. I'm Kevin Kramer. Welcome, everybody, and thank you, Dave, for lending your tremendous talents to this evening. I think they made a great unanimous choice in having you be the moderator. And thanks to the North Dakota Tea Party Caucus and all of the other organizations that are participating. Thanks for this opportunity, as well as to my colleagues for joining me at the table tonight. I'm in this race because I feel like I've never felt like America needed what North Dakota can offer more than it needs it right now. I'm compelled into this race because I've had the great blessing these last several years to serve the citizens of North Dakota as your elected Public Service Commissioner, overseeing the most dynamic energy economy anywhere in the world today. I would like to take those skills to Washington, D.C. to do for our country what we've been able to do for the United States of America. And just so the record is very clear, I've never passed legislation. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on something. There seems to be a little bit of a theme here that you believe that government spending is out of control at the federal level. I'd like to start with Commissioner Kolk and say, where would you cut the budget?
First, Dave, please call me Brian, all right?
I will.
I think the first thing we do is we need to pass a budget. Congress has not passed the budget now for coming on 3 years. So that's the number one role of Congress, is to pass a budget. The first thing that I would cut is foreign aid to countries that aren't our friends. You look at, as a retired Marine, we have military policy that's very important to the security of our country. But why are we giving money to countries that we don't know where they're at? Why are we giving money to Pakistan? Why are we giving money to some of those North African countries? That'd be the first thing I cut, is military spending to countries that aren't our friends.
Okay. Representative Koppelman.
Well, thank you, Dave. I think rolling back the budget to the levels it was at before this president took office, to the 2007 levels, would be the first step. We'd save trillions of dollars if we do that. The budget is clearly out of control, the debt is out of control, and we just recently reached, as you may have heard, the point where the federal debt now equals our GDP, which means that we owe as much as we produce in a year. That's a huge red flag. It's a huge danger flag for our economy and our future.
Commissioner Gittle.
I think we can roll back discretionary spending to the 2008 or 2007 or 2006 levels, take your pick, because we haven't had that much inflation in our economy. And at that point in time, it wasn't, those programs were working. But we really don't make much progress on this budget unless we are willing to put some ideas that will tackle the entitlement programs, because that's the mandatory spending that is really out of control. And so we have to have some entitlement reform ideas on the table as part of this campaign and part of this campaign season.
Okay. Representative Grundy.
Thank you. Well, I think that we have a theme going here, and there is legislation that has been passed through the House already dealing with these particular issues, or their proposals that are on the table. There's a 2010 budget, and it's called a penny legislation, where then they take that and they're dropping 1% off from that each time. And I have stood up and said before that I think that the pre-Obama, the 2008, earlier is a good starting point. Let's start there and we can cut and work the 1% off of there. But I think part of that too also goes with the fact that we could eliminate the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, Housing and Urban Development, Energy. We could take and work at privatization of the National Endowment of the Arts, National Endowment of the Humanities, Corporation of Public Broadcasting and Legal Services. Oh, did that sound radical? I just read from the Republican platform. Thank you.
Commissioner Kramer.
Well, I'd love to go back to 2007 or 2008 spending. As Shane said, you take your pick. That would be a great place to start. But I think going forward, we have to have a freeze on all hiring, all salaries and wages. You'd be amazed how little we'd miss the positions that weren't filled in the federal government. Because this bureaucracy takes on an absolute life of its own as it grows and grows and grows. As Ronald Reagan said there, government bureau is the closest thing to eternal life you'll ever find on this earth. And there's no question about that. And I think it's very difficult to roll them back. But if we just froze them, going into the future would be a good starting point. Shane's exactly right. To have meaningful reform, we have to tackle the entitlement programs, and I suspect we're going to get to have a little more debate about that specifically tonight. But the reality is this, that when I go to bed at night, I never lose any sleep worrying about how much money is coming back to North Dakota from Washington, D.C. But what keeps me up at night is that we are, for future generations, replacing the American dream with an American debt. And the fact that my grandchildren and yours will be born with owing $50,000 upon birth is, I think, shameful as a nation.
And Mr. Olson.
Well, the largest expense is our military efforts overseas. I would like to immediately end all of our foreign campaigns and our foreign aid. It's unnecessary, and it's digging us a deeper hole and more expensive hole for the future. Second to that, or might be coming up on first pretty quick, is the money that's going into the banks, the bailouts. I would like to prevent any of that from happening in the future. We don't need to bail out Europe. We shouldn't be bailing out private business at all. Like, if I operate my business poorly and I lose my customers, or if I go bankrupt, I should go bankrupt. Nobody should come and bail me out. My competitors should be able to come in and hire my employees and take my customers. That's how a free market should work. Right now, we are printing money to give out to banks and loaning it to them at an interest rate that is less than inflation. We're giving away our wealth that we don't have, that we're paying to borrow for, or that we're taxing ourselves through inflation.
Okay. We will get to the issue of entitlements in a little bit, but I do want to get to the health care issue because the health care reform bill has been very controversial. And there is not a lot of support in North Dakota, at least it seems, for the health care bill the way it is constructed. Two-part question, and I'll start with Representative Copeland. Number one, will you and can you get the bill repealed? And secondly, what would you replace it with?
Good questions, Dave. Thank you. The answer is yes and yes. And we would replace it with meaningful reform that is consumer-centered, and that concentrates on the relationship between the patients and the doctor and the free enterprise system. I think it's critical, as we look at this issue, to recognize, number one, that it's been a sham from the beginning. The administration played games with smoke and mirrors and cooked the books to try to pretend that it was paid for. It's not. And clearly it's unconstitutional, in my view, on many fronts. The most popular point of discussion there has probably been the individual mandate, and that's clearly at the crux of the court challenges that are going forward that the Supreme Court is going to consider very soon. Our healthcare system needs some reform. There are pieces of the legislation that was passed that are helpful, like the Frontier Amendment, which helps medical facilities in North Dakota and makes sure they're paid fairly. But that kind of reform can be done very easily without this sweeping unconstitutional takeover of our healthcare system by the federal government.
Commissioner Gettle.
One of the fundamental problems with the Health Care Act, which we call Obamacare, is the individual mandate, which I believe is unconstitutional, and unconstitutional in a manner that gives the Supreme Court an opportunity to strike down the whole act. That may happen, but if it doesn't, Congress needs to repeal it as well, and if it can't accomplish that, to defund many of the provisions that are in there. This act sets up 159 new programs and offices and puts the Secretary of Health and Human Services at the middle of our healthcare system. The middle of our healthcare system should be our patients and doctors and their families. I think we can replace this with true reform that's much more market-driven, that puts consumers in the driver's seat in terms of choice, and real choice that allows them to shop around for their insurance products that they can take with them wherever they go to make them portable. That means we're going to need platforms around the country and every healthcare facility that can take that type of insurance, But if I buy my insurance early in life and I'm able to take it with me wherever I go, that will solve a lot of the pre-existing condition issues that we've had. And I think that's the kind of reform we need in this country.
Okay. Representative Grandy.
Thank you. Well, it has to be repealed in its totality and just rip it out by the root. There is nothing that needs to stay in place. You don't tinker around the edges with it. And this being said, I think, you know, one of the portions of this that I found really interesting was when it affected my children's student loans. And that's an aspect of it that we have to make sure stays out of any of this type of thing. But with that, replacing it, and when we talk about replacing pieces or fixing certain things that are broken, let's also remember that legislation should be coming in a single bill form, not 2,000-page bill forms, and not bills that require 5 reams of paper of different pieces of rules that come with it. But with that, it is exactly right. We need to figure out how to deal with rural health, and we do need to deal with choices made in the private markets.
Commissioner Kramer.
Thanks, Dave. This question actually relates directly to the previous question about what would you cut. This would be a great place to cut. The repeal of Obamacare. If we would repeal it, we could save lots of federal dollars on top of giving people their freedom back. With regard to the market-driven piece of it, I totally agree, and I think that healthcare savings accounts are a great way to start. Give people an incentive to stay healthy, not give them an incentive to go to the doctor. Give people an incentive to prevent problems rather than an incentive to run to the emergency room or run to the walk-in clinic. And let's give people the control to use those savings accounts to shop around. Guess what shopping around does? It forces competition. Guess what competition does? It increases quality. Guess what else it does? Is it reduces costs. And I think with those basic reforms, along with a cap on liability, we have got to have tort reform as it relates to health care so that we don't have the lawyers being the only people getting rich from health care.
Mr. Olson.
It is unconstitutional and it should be repealed. I don't see any reason that the federal government should have any say in health care. It's certainly better left up to the states, if not individual people. I am also categorically against the government telling people that they have to purchase a particular product or service. And in this case, it's one that we're forced to pay through taxes under threat of imprisonment if we don't. That's just not right. And it isn't a free market. People don't treat expenses the same when they don't see them come out of their own pocket. And this is something that allows the true expense of medical care to be concealed.
And Commissioner Collins.
Thank you, Dave. What I thought was interesting about this whole Obamacare debate, when our president should have been focusing on getting the economy going, he focused on passing Obamacare. You know, the biggest detriment to our economy getting going right now perhaps is Obamacare, along with the overregulation. But if the Supreme Court doesn't roll it back first, I certainly would vote to repeal Obamacare. And the second part, what we do with it, you know, the portability functions of it, I think are important. You need to have portability so you can take it with you. Also, the incentives for folks to take care of themselves so they need the services less. And finally, I think just an understanding of what is the responsibility of individuals for health care. You know, it is not necessarily a government right to have health care. It's something that states can decide and individuals can decide.